So Dr. Ginsburg,
Yes.
just a quick question. A lot of the participants want to know if you were able to get the knife away from the 14-year-old girl.
Absolutely. Because she engaged fully in it and we were able to do conflict resolution and whatnot. Is this open to everyone or is this just you asking me?
It is open to everybody. It was in the chat box.
No, I didn't know if I was talking to everybody now.
Nope, everybody's still live.
Okay, good. Okay. The question that gets asked very often actually is whether or not I needed to report the girl. And if it was 2020, there would have been zero tolerance. She would have been reported and suspended. This is like a 20-year-old story, and we were able to get the knife away, do conflict resolution. The girl actually, they went home friends. They were friends before the event, and they were friends after the event. Okay. All right, I think we are ready to go. So now we're still talking about control, but now we're talking about self-discipline and what we know from the parenting research, right? So self-discipline is self-control. Remember that the word discipline means to teach or to guide. It doesn't mean to punish or to control. Self-discipline is able to control yourself, just a kind of the best definition I can give you. And why draw from the parenting research? Because there's not a parallel research. First of all, we are parents. Second of all, we are reparenting many of our kids who have had hard lives, right? But also because there's not really literature that tells you about this balancing act about giving kids control and guiding kids towards the right behaviors from a professional point of view. So what do we know? It is about balancing love and warmth. What's there to love and warmth? Love is what you feel. Warmth is what a kid knows you feel. So if you feel love, but a kid has no idea, it's not maximizing its protection. And monitoring, which also comes with safety and rules. When we do this, we're talking about parenting style. So on one hand, you have love and warmth, and sticking over there is responsiveness, meaning flexibility and attention to development as opposed to strict rules. On the other side, you have monitoring, rules, and boundaries. So 60 years of research on this, actually probably 65 at this point, of research on the balancing act and what we know from it. So on the one hand, you have warmth, and on the other hand, you have rules. When you do that, you have 4 different parenting styles. The first is lots of rules, not a lot of warmth. This is, you'll do what I say. Why? Because I said so. Or while you're under my roof, you'll follow my rules. Or my personal favorite, which is, which letter in the word no do you not get, young lady? This is called authoritarian parenting. How do these kids turn out? These kids are angels. These are the yes ma'am, no ma'am kids. These are the kids you can take to the supermarket and they'll walk in unison behind their mother, right? Because there's no room for error. These kids, however, act out in adolescence. Once they get bigger or can no longer be controlled by their parent, they act out. And what happens is their behaviors that were controlled get delayed. So for example, if you approach sexuality in an authoritarian way, no daughter of mine will, then your daughter will on average have her first sexual encounter 3 months after her peers. When she does, you're least likely to know about it. She's more likely to get pregnant, to get STIs, and to even have abortions. This has been studied. In reaction to this kind of parenting, which was very, very common in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s, parents went equal and opposite when they raised their own kids. And this is largely the parents of our adolescents now. They went very, very warm, not a lot of rules. Darling, I love you. I couldn't talk to my dad about a lot of things, so I want you to think of us as friends. Call me Ken. And I'm going to let you, I'm going to role model for you. I'm going to spend a lot of quality time with you, but I trust you. You'll do the right thing because you know what I want for you. And that is called permissive parenting. These kids love their parents very much. They do not tell them what's going on in their life, however. unless it's a friendly and fun thing, and they engage in quite a bit of risk behavior, and they believe that their parents have given them permission. The worst kind of parenting, by far, is doesn't have rules and it doesn't have warmth. So this is kids will be kids. I figured it out. They figured it out. You know, if they start a fire, I'll get a fire hose. What do these kids do? They light the barn on fire. Why? Because it's the only way they can get attention. This leads to delinquency. This is called disengaged parenting. The correct kind of parenting, and I believe reparenting and adulting for adults in kids' lives, is lots of rules and boundaries and lots of warmth. And what does this look like? Darling, I love you so much, but you know, I'm your father, I'm not your friend, and that's way better for you. I'm gonna let you make mistakes. I'm gonna be there by your side to make sure that you can get up on your own. But for the things that really matter, and those are the things that might affect your safety, or it might affect who you are as a human being, you'll do as I say, because my job is to protect you and to shape you, right? What do these kids look like? And these people, when we discipline, it's all in the context of love. You may not do blank because I love you and this affects your safety, right? You need the whole sentence to go with it. What do these kids look like? They do the best in school, both academically and socially. They are less likely to do drugs. They are less likely to be anxious, to be depressed. They're less likely to do drugs, to have early sex, to be in a car crash. That's my own research. They're less likely to be exposed to violence, to be bullied, or to be a bully. In every category, these kids do better, who are raised by balanced parents. The academic literature will call this authoritative as opposed to authoritarian. I call this lighthouse parenting in my books. Parents, you should be like a lighthouse for your child, a stable force on the shoreline from which they can measure themselves against. You should look down at the rocks and make sure that they don't crash against them. Look into the waves and trust in their capacity to learn to ride them, and prepare them to do so. Lighthouse parenting. What is effective monitoring for parents? So we talked about love a lot today, but now let's talk about how to do rules right. So if you go back 15 years, or not even 15, maybe 10 years, the literature was, and the public health interventions were all parents, you're the anti-drug. You should ask your kids where they're going, who they're going to be with, what they're going to do. It was the who and what whys of parenting. Lots of questions. You don't see this anymore. Can you guess why? You don't see this because it didn't work. And it didn't work because kids lied. So when we relied on kids answering our questions, it didn't work. What is now very clear is that we know what kids choose to tell us, and that the key to monitoring is to being the kind of parent that makes it so kids want to disclose to you. So let's go back. If you believe the myth that kids don't care about safety, that they think they're invulnerable, absolutely not true. If you believe that, then none of this makes sense. But if you know the truth, that kids want to be safe, and they want adults involved in their lives, not in their personal business, but to keep them safe, then who are you going to go to if you're trying to make a decision? Do you go to the parent who's authoritarian? No. You go to this parent, you already know the answer. It's no. There's no reason to go to them. Do you go to this parent? Permissive? No. There's no reason to go to them. You already know the answer. It's yes. This is the tragedy of this generation of middle-class parents, is they tried to do everything right, but it backfired because the kids didn't want to talk to them and accept as friends. Do you go to this parent? No, because you already know what the answer is. It's, I don't care. Call me if you get in a lot of trouble. You go to this parent who only really dives in when it's an issue of safety or morality. So those parents know the most. But there are other issues as well. Parents have to learn things, and these are all things that are very thoroughly gone over in my books for parents, but they have to know how not to be reactive, right? If you turn on a parent alarm, the kids will never talk to you. Mom, I met this girl. You're too young to date. Mom, my friend Paul uses drugs. Don't ever see Paul again. Kids don't like drama from their parents. You have to be calm. You have to be collected. You have to not be reactive. You have to be reflective and give the kids space to come to you. Now, there are many other techniques, but I'm not going to, in the context of this talk, to give this to you. So when do you jump in and when do you allow mistakes in recovery as a parent? It gets back to this puzzle, right? So think of adolescence as putting together this huge puzzle. It's got 1,000 pieces and it's called Who Am I? What do you do first when you're putting together the puzzle? First thing you do is you put together the edges. That's the power of parents having very, very clear rules and boundaries. What's the next thing you do? You put together the groups. And so you put together a bunch of things that are red. And then you say to yourself, I wonder if this is going to be a cherry or a fire engine or a lollipop. Well, you don't want to wait to the end. So you look at the picture on the box to cheat. That's the power of role modeling. We are the pictures on the box of kids as they build their puzzle. So we do our job when we have very clear boundaries beyond which they can stray. They keep them safe. When we are role models for our kids. All the other pieces that are left over in the middle, those are the irregular periods, pieces that kind of go together, that kind of don't, that there's a lot of room for experimentation and failure. Get out of their way. And my pet peeve, not my pet peeve, my pet concern for youth development programs, including my own, is that we have so many rules to prevent kids from getting the edges that we prevent them from developing normally. Kids need opportunities to fail. They need to do so safely. So your boundaries have to be very clear, but you have to have a lot of things within those boundaries that you don't have rules about if you're a pro-development program. Next, we're still talking about control, but now we're bringing up a new topic, which is stress management and resilience. At its core, stress management is about learning to cope in a positive way with life's inevitable stressors. And we might do our greatest good by equipping kids with this wide range of coping strategies. And this is a major way of gaining control over your life. You see, life is stressful, and stress makes you uncomfortable. And you got to deal with that discomfort. And there are different ways of dealing with it. There are positive ways of dealing with it that ultimately lead to relief, but all the quick and easy ways, they're negative, right? But they're quick, sometimes fun, and too easy. And whenever you hear the word quick and easy together, think addiction. So for example, drugs. Drugs is a quick, easy fix, but it's in the negative category because it feeds back into this system or into this loop so that it just creates more stress for you. Same with sex out of the context of a relationship, bullying, cutting, eating disorders. Virtually all the things we fear in adolescence are in this box. What we have to stop doing is telling kids what not to do, and instead, because that just doesn't work, and instead build in them a wide repertoire of positive coping strategies so that the path of least resistance is right there. So I'm going to show you a comprehensive plan that you can use for free now in 5 minutes. And we'll talk about what that looks like when we get there. But first, let's point out that the worst thing is not to be stressed, it's to be numb, right? Our goal, we talk about stress like it's such a bad thing, but actually a little bit of stress activates you and energizes you and prepares you, and it's not such a bad thing. What's really, really bad is when you become numb. So now, I speak to you on two levels. I speak to you on the level of being professionals and thinking about your own burnout, and I ask you to be professionals and think about kids and what stress looks like both for you and for them. Things come at you, different sources of pain. For us, we might have pain in our own lives, but largely it's that we bear witness to pain. For kids, it's that they are experiencing this pain themselves. And it feels chaotic, and it's coming from many, many different directions. The way to keep yourself together in the context of these things continuing to come is to build a container around that chaos. That is what keeps us sane and together, is that we build a box. And we say to ourselves, we're going to deal with this later. We will. We really will. But we don't. So instead, things keep coming. And as they keep coming, you wish you could deal with them, but you don't. So what do? In order to keep all of that inside, you build thicker walls. And now what happens is the container that was designed to keep inside the thoughts and feelings and make them safe with the intention of processing it later now becomes what I call a leaden box. Why lead? Because a little bit of lead in your system is toxic. Toxic to your development, toxic to your brain, to your ability to think. Lead is too heavy to lift. And lead is, even Superman can't see through lead. And then what happens is someone opens the lid one way or another and out pours rage. And then someone says, you seem so angry. So let's go back and look at this piece by piece. This is what happened to you. This is when people only see what you express and say what's wrong with you. This is professional burnout. There's so much stuff inside that you just stop feeling. And for people like us who go into these fields because we feel, because we care so deeply, there's nothing worse than not feeling. For our kids, this is chaos. And if you want your head to stop spinning, I'd suggest marijuana, because marijuana makes your head stop spinning. If you want control over your explosions because you can't stand the randomness of the explosion, get drunk. So this model also is at the root of substance use. So what we want to do now is build a better model, both for our kids and for us. It's what I call the Tupperware box. Why Tupperware? Because it's still a container, but you can see it inside it, and what you see don't stink. You're still protected enough from it. What do? We, rather than having things in a chaotic way, what we do is we organize our thoughts and feelings. This is the essence of being emotionally intelligent. Rather than having things that are really chaotic, we understand that what is inside. So in my own life, I could tell you the major things that affected me, right? I could tell you it's Luis from New York and Miguel from Nicaragua and Roderick from South Dakota. I can tell you the major things that affected me. The father who watched his, I don't even want to say that. There's so many things that really affected me deeply, but I know what they are. The 19-year-old girl who died in my arms from leukemia, who didn't allow me to tell her boyfriend she was dying to the last hour of her life. Okay, these things that deeply, deeply affected me. But when I go through the process of emotional intelligence by naming my stories, I control them rather than them controlling me. This is a big technique I use with kids. Then what do? We open the lid at a time of our choosing, at a time that is safe. We don't let out chaos. We choose one story, one thing, and then we take it out in a way that completes this sentence. I blanked it out. I cried it out. I laughed it out. I prayed it out. I screamed it out. I blanked it out. And when we do that, then we control our emotions and we release them. We burp the box closed. There's just a little bit left inside, a little bit less left inside to harm us. And so that's the Tupperware box model. I think it's very important for professional development, and it's a high level of counseling to help kids get through things. I want to now introduce you to the Center for Parent and Teen Communication. There are several resources that I'm making available to you today. And it's important to know that, like, I have full awareness that listening to me is like drinking water from a fire hose, right? But you have to know that in the pre-COVID days, I would be giving you an all-day talk. In some communities, I give 3 or 4 days of talk. We have this huge toolkit with a huge online version that can kind of make it so that you can work within your agency to do self-teaching, to bring all of these levels home. We have parenting books that allow parents to take this stuff home. All of that has an expense associated with it. What I'm about to show you, no expense, you can use today You can link to it today. This is the Center for Parent and Teen Communication. This is a multicultural setting, which is important to understand because most parenting information is delivered from a white biased standpoint. Why does that matter? Because it perpetuates structural inequities. Because when you make people who are from communities of color feel as if what they're doing is somehow less good because, for example, it works for the community's health and the family's health rather than the individual success, then you shame and you stigmatize and you harm. So this site is multicultural, not just in what we are putting out there in pictures, but in actually extensive consultation to make sure we don't do this. My partner's work is Joanna Lee Williams from Rutgers University, and we just got a grant to put out a lot of information to meet the moment for communities of color. With that said, this is going to be the most comprehensive parenting website that you're going to ever see, okay? It has films, it has videos, it has 100-word pieces, 2,000-word pieces. Each of these content areas has a subsection. Like here you see puberty and other changes, the teen brain, supporting healthy decisions, success in school and life, lots of different categories. Under communication strategies, we have parenting that works, which teaches parents how to become balanced parents, how to discipline right under that appropriately, how to face challenges with your kid and invite them back into your life. For you guys, I want to highlight two things. Number one, all of your parents can be linked to this immediately. But I want you to be aware of two things because we're talking about mental health. And I believe that this is, and I've given you the main links, PJ will get them out to you, but preparing teens to seek professional help. This article is the strength-based language of giving kids, letting kids know why they are deserving of help. Not deserving, not needing, deserving. Start from a place of strength, right? Let them know how powerful it is that they recognize that they can seek help. And then talk about the help-seeking process. They've got to know that treatment can work, that they're not wasting their time, that time invested is going to pay off, that it is an act of strength. A strong person is a person who seeks support, not someone who says, I can handle it all or I deserve to feel badly. And you're not going to be alone. Me sending you to help doesn't mean I'm abandoning you. It's I'm giving you more than just I can give you, but I'm giving you everything as I stand along your side. This piece here highlight how strong feelings lead to a strong adulthood later. I just want to tell you that as a guy who's now almost 60 and has had the happiest life you can imagine. But when I was 17, I spent the whole year practically thinking about killing myself, right? And if someone had told me then that the things that created pain in me, the breadth of my emotion, the depth of my passion, that those were actually normal masculine feelings that predicted I'd be a good guy when I grew up, I would have been okay, right? I just didn't know that any of my feelings were normal or acceptable. And this is what I needed to know, that those strong feelings meant that I'd be of a strong adulthood later. And then I need to know how my relationships with professionals are special, right? What is special about those relationships? You know, they're going to honor my privacy. They're there to support me. They're going to be guiding me, not repairing me, right? And that they can strengthen my other relationships. So this is an article that is strength-based that I believe can really help you support families to support your suggestions. And now for teens, there's two large categories. There's about 20 articles on how teens should talk to their parents, but I want to show you the managing stress piece. And I invite all of your organizations to link to this now. This is free, this is interactive, this is confidential, we're not saving any data, okay? There are many articles here written by kids for kids, but all rooted in the evidence based on my work, which is translating science into action. So let's start with the one article that can get it all, Build a Teen Stress Management Plan. In this article, it will explain stress biology, about choices, about the different categories in building a stress management plan. The three big categories: how do you solve a problem? Within that, you got to identify and tackle it. You got to break your mountains into hills. You got to avoid things that stress you out. You got to conserve your energy. You got to have strong bodies. To have strong bodies, you have to know how to use exercise, relaxation. You got to feed yourself right, and you got to sleep well. You got to know how to manage emotions. Sometimes you just avoid emotions. By the way, this is drug prevention. If you don't teach people how to avoid emotions and you just teach people how to process emotions, they're still going to find drugs. You have to, with just as much integrity and intention, you have to help people know how to get away from your feelings sometimes, like reading a book, right? Like working on a hobby, taking a walk, like prayer, how to get away from your emotions. But the things that work best is actually reading a book. Because when you read a book, your entire brain is occupied. There's no room for intrusive thoughts. Releasing emotions, that's about dealing with your emotions. And the last category is giving back. People who know that they contribute to the world have a sense of meaning and purpose. And when they have a sense of meaning and purpose, they're going to feel valuable. And your ultimate act of resilience, people, is to be able to turn to another human being and say, brother, I need a hand. That's who survives, is the person who says, brother, I need a hand. What is it that's going to make someone feel safe going to another human being? It's knowing that there's no pity on the other end. I'm not going to someone who's going to pity me. When I've given, I understand that giving makes you feel great. And that what that means is that when I need to receive and someone is ready to give to me, I can do so without shame or stigma, because I understand that that person is doing it out of their own pleasure and desire. So I introduce you here, and when you're ready, you start your plan. And when you start your plan, we walk you through it in 11 steps. We make it very clear that this does not replace medical advice, and that doctors, counselors, and health professionals are giving you more than we can give you here. We take your name and your address, and we do not keep it. That is only to instantly give you your own PDF plan. So this does not replace counseling. This is an adjunct to counseling, okay? So step one, identify and tackle the problem. What do I treat like a real tiger? Something I treat like a real tiger is homework. Why isn't this a real threat? Well, it doesn't put my health at risk. It can't harm me. It won't do long-term damage to me. And I don't know what the other thing, but I can write anything I want. Why is this problem temporary? And we think about the fact that this too shall pass, which is a really important cognitive skill to have. What's good in my life? And then we teach them the cognitive word yet. I don't have any friends becomes I don't have any friends yet. Very powerful cognitive word. We go next to how do I break big problems into small pieces? What's my mountain? What is overwhelming me? College applications. Then you say, how do I break it down? What hill can I attack first? I can make a to-do list. I can take on the easiest task first. I'm going to temporarily get away from it, but I'm going to blah, blah, blah. Okay? From there, we go to, I need to avoid some problems. I need to not deal with everything. What is it that I can just avoid? You know, the teaching is if there's a bully in your school, you got to confront it. If there's a bully in your neighborhood, and if he doesn't see you, he doesn't do anything, go around the block, right? That is really important to learn, right? What can I do to avoid this problem? Next, I got to conserve my energy. What's not worth worrying about? And how can I shift focus onto things I can change? And again, they fill in all of the answers. Now we do exercise. Let's build an exercise plan. What am I going to do? I'm going to run and I'm going to play basketball. And on Saturdays, I'm going to go to yoga. When can I find time to the exercise? It's got to be early morning for me. Next, how are we going to relax? Now keep in mind, I can click here and I can go to a YouTube video. It's not like I don't have lots of room to learn more when I'm doing this plan, or I can do it in 15 minutes. All right. What are some advanced strategies to relax? Yoga, mindfulness. What else can I do? Keep going. From there, what do I need to do to eat more healthily? From there, what's going on with sleep? There's too much noise in my bedroom. I'm worried at night. How can I get a better night's sleep? I'm going to set my cell phone in night settings to get at least a couple of hours before bed. I'm going to make lists going to bed and remind myself that the next day is planned. I'm going to take a relaxing bath or shower an hour before bed. Next, what instant vacation will work for me? For me, it's all about reading and expressing myself creatively, but there's a lot of other options. From there, how can I release my emotions? For me, I'm a writer and I'm a talker. Sometimes I like to laugh, and when I'm really doing a good job, I cry. From here, what am I going to do to make the world better? I'm going to be volunteering. I'm going to da-da-da-da-da. Now we save our personal stress management plan, and the kid has a comprehensive strategy to manage stress. For those of you who are affiliated with school systems, use this and then put these things in your curriculum at various times. This should not be a 20-minute lecture. This should be a part of your culture. Reaching Teens has a portal just for schools, okay? With that said, when we teach kids how to manage stress in a healthy way, we're teaching them what to do, not just telling them what not to do. Now, let's spend a moment thinking about caring for the caregiver. Because what I didn't say earlier about the grandmas is that they need protection. Because what else do we know about that grandma who protected that young man or that young woman? We know that she dies too soon. Because just as she absorbs the pain of the neighborhood, remains hypervigilant, and creates the cortisol reaction so her child doesn't need to, she harms her own body. And we've got to work on this on two levels. One is literally protecting the grandmas and the grandpas out there. And second, we have to recognize that I am asking you to be the grandma and the grandpa. Ann and PJ, they're asking you to be the grandmas and the grandpas. When I ask you to be the person young people need in their lives, I am harming you, literally. It is easier to avert your eyes to human tragedy than to intervene within it. And that is why, to be trauma sensitive, we have to have in parallel at the same time as Reaching Teens does, a curricula that protects the adults who are designed to protect the children. And I'm not going to spend hours on that. I'm going to spend 5 minutes on the essential issue, which is boundaries. Boundaries are not about building walls. Boundaries about putting up issues that are not issues, but dealing with things so that you can actually draw nearer to people. So if you go to my professional site, right, if you go to, the pediatrician site, here's what I learned. I learned I'm not supposed to touch the children inappropriately or date their mothers or fathers. I learned that I'm not supposed to take big presents from them, but if it's baked or craft goods, it's in my discretion. I need you to know how much this does not help me in any way in boundaries education, right? I wasn't going to do any of these things anyway. I want to know, how do you love and still remain whole? And I want you to know that we've been talking about a lot of this all day. You got to know where your buttons are, guys. If you are human and if you are alive and if you went through adolescence, you're stuck somewhere. And there are going to be certain kids who you might have been attracted to, who never would have been attracted to you, who might remind you of their bullies, or their trauma reminds you of your own, right? Their kids are going to push your buttons. And what that does is it creates emotional labor for you, right? Meaning it's just harder to do this work because it's about you. And knowing what your buttons are is the first reflective process that you can go through to make it so that you will not, that you can go through to make it so that you will not have that degree of emotional labor as you bear witness to unspeakable truths in other people. Being trauma sensitive. Guys, when we begin with the lesson of knowing what is about you and what is not about you, that is very, very powerful. When we understand that it's about giving control to other people, it actually relieves you. Not about not caring, but it relieves you of absorbing the pain, because the healing happens not in your presence, you're planting seeds. When you know who the expert in the room is, and you know that it's always the young person, it relieves you of the rescue fantasy. The rescue fantasy was wisely asked by one of the questioners earlier, right? You know, when I began this work, I was supposed to be the medical director of New York of Covenant House. There was a big scandal. It was 1990. So I lost my job before I had it. It's all good because things have worked out better for me, and I'm now deeply involved with Covenant House internationally as well as in Philadelphia. But it's a shame that I lost that job because I'd already done a lot of work for them. I knew how to be a street fighter doc. I bled for the kids. They knew how much I cared for them. And when they weren't ready to move forward, I would give them as much energy of mine as I could so they knew that they could move forward. I was in a rescue fantasy, which is inherently classist and racist. Number one, when you tap a vein for someone, you run out of blood. Number two, I've got to give them the ruby slippers. I can't have this be about me. When you just heard me describe myself at 27, if you listen to that paragraph, there was too much I in it. And it's not just that that wasn't therapeutic for the kids, that was detrimental to me. And I'll tell you exactly how long I would have practiced, because now it's 38 years later, and I'm like Covenant House International uses Reaching Teens, every site in the world, right? So I am deeply, deeply involved, right? But if I had gone to New York as the street fighter doctor, I would have lasted for a year in my rescue fantasy. And now I can tell you what would have broken me. It would have been the kids who I cared about, who cared about me. And when they relapsed, they never would have told me out of fear of disappointing me. Because I didn't know that very basic lesson of making it be about relationship and not what they were doing for me. That would have devastated me because I wouldn't have had the wisdom to understand it. And I would have left homeless medicine. So, giving control back to people from whom control has been taken away. Just one more thing that says it's about you, it's not about me. Profoundly important boundary. I'm going to skip these issues except for just to name them here, which is this whole concept of knowing how much you're going to share. You know, a lot of us have been through a lot of the things the kids are going through. Be very careful what you share and understand that if you're going through a crisis right now, do not share it, because it feels denigrating to the kids, it's minimizing them, and they're going to begin taking care of you. And whatever you tell them is going to go in the evening news. And remember this. Well, let me just do this. How much do we give each youth? Boundaries is about giving a kid what they need and giving the kid what you are best at giving and getting them to something more. So sometimes when a kid needs the most is not when they get the whole Dr. Ken show, right? Because they're just going to get what will, in a respectful way, get them to the depth of intervention that they deserve. But the kid who only needs the Dr. Ken show gets it all and gets more of me because they just need a 1 hour or 2 hours of inspirational reframing of themselves. Next, we have to practice as the we's, not as an I. You gotta go home. Let me tell you the worst thing that you can do to burn out. The worst thing you can do is to take the experiences you have in a work setting and then tell your family that they don't have a right to their emotions. This is how you lose your family. I'm going to tell you a true story from me. So it was my girls' senior prom night. I have identical girls. They're going to turn 25 in 2 weeks. Their brains are done, apparently. They are the best people in the world, all right, completely committed to equity, justice, and whatnot. But it's it's their night of their senior prom. I have a day at Covenant House that is unbelievably bad. I don't remember what happened, but I was spent. I came home and the girls were extremely upset. They were extremely upset because they had paid $150 of their own money to get smoky eyes done for prom pictures, and it was too dark and they were going to look bad. Everything, every corpuscle in my body wanted to say to them, WTF, do you want to know what a problem is? Let me tell you what a problem is. Do you know how lucky you are to have $150 to waste on smoky eyes? But I didn't. And instead, and I acted like it was a tragedy, as I should have, or like it was important to them, as I had to do. And then what I did is go to the prom and take all the pictures, right, that I needed to take. And then the universe took care of everything for me. Trust the universe. So everyone else goes down to Wildwood, Jersey from their high school and does whatever kids do on prom night. And my kids had to come home at 2 in the morning because it was also the 25th anniversary of the Holocaust Museum. And so my girls ended up going to the anniversary with me and my wife, with her my mother-in-law, who is now 95 and who's the last survivor of the first transport in Auschwitz, number 1064. In that room were 800 survivors and 800 American liberators, which, if you don't know this, were mostly African American. And that room was so powerful that you can't imagine. And the next day, when all the kids hung the pictures of prom night, you know, the whatever pictures, my girls had a picture of my mother-in-law's arm with her tattoo, with another arm, and it said, "The bravest people we have met." Trust the universe. Do not take this home with you. Do not tell your own kids that they don't have a right to feel whatever they're feeling. That is the kiss of death to professional development, and it will make you lose your family. And the day you lose your family is the day you quit your job. Final big topic. We have to flip the script, right? We have to change the way we see adolescence from a time to be survived to a time to be celebrated. There are, and this is what we do outside of our offices. This is what we do as communities, as advocates who really know kids. There are some myths that disempower parents and professionals from entering kids' lives, and they're just not true. We used to think infants weren't paying attention. Now we know that they're paying attention to everything. Now we still perpetuate the myths that adolescents think they're invincible or invulnerable. Not true. That they're wired for risks. Not true. They're wired for experimentation. That they don't care what parents think. Not true. Don't like adults. Not true. Can't be reasoned with. Not true. Are self-centered. Anything but true. Look at what happening in our society. Yes, do they care what they look like? Yes. But that doesn't mean they're self-centered. Black Lives Matter. The school shootings, the environmentalists. This is youth. It is the righteous indignation of youth that sees things as they are and say they shouldn't be that way. And we rely on that as a culture. But what we also do as a culture is shut them down. And one of the ways that we shut them down is by pretending them that they don't have a right to their views because they're just self-centered and naive. We have to flip this script and celebrate and elevate adolescents and engage fully with them. If you believe these myths, you're going to think engagement doesn't matter. If you believe these myths, you're going to think that what kids need is to be protected from themselves rather than developed to learn how to be safe. Almost done. And then we're going to have at least 10 minutes for questions. Let's talk about how do we judge our success. I understand that there's a lot of administrators and program leaders on this call. And I know that you have measures that you have to have, but I just want to put out there that this model is not easy to measure. So go ahead. You can measure grades, jobs, graduations, suspension rates. You can measure people being reunified with their families, how many meals you serve. You can measure that, keep going. But what we're really trying to do is prove that adolescents are capable of healing from trauma. We're trying to help young people experience that people are worthy of trust, right? That's what lasts forever. And remember, why do we love? We love so that young people know they're worthy of being loved. Think about how many of you have met a kid you hadn't seen for 20 years in a grocery store. And they're like, "Dr. Ken, do you remember me?" And you don't. When you say, "Your face looks so familiar, help me with that." And they say, "Well, I was a little bit of a knucklehead when you were talking to me, but I was hearing everything you say." I'd like to introduce you to my daughter here. This is Luisa. And you know what? She's 8 years old and I love her. And you know how I learned about love? It was from Miss Cordella, who didn't know me from a can of paint, but who wouldn't let go. She kept talking to me and being there for me, even when I was pushing her away. That's why I'm a good mom. I've had many of these experiences of the fact that we are planting the seeds. But planting the seeds, there is nothing like helping young people know that people are worthy of trust and that they're worthy of being loved. And that makes them more likely they're going to pass along our love to their children and thereby break the cycle of trauma and oppression. We want to make it so our young people can feel again. And we want to create the kind of environment where staff never forgets how to feel. We want to create schools and communities that are really safer. And one other thought, you know, even as I talk about how wonderful it is that the kids who have been through some of the hardest times are also the most compassionate. Do not walk away for a moment thinking that I'm thinking trauma is good for you. It's not. You know what I want? I want every kid to be worried about a B+ or smoky eyes. I want that for every kid, right? We still want the best of what's kids, but we also can bring out the best of those kids who have had hard lives. And at the end of this talk, like I said earlier, I totally know that listening to me is like drinking water from a fire hose. It's overwhelming. You have so many things to do, right? So many programs to put into place, so many initiatives to implement, so many measures to measure, so many things to do, recordings to record. And along comes this little man from Philadelphia who says to you, now you've got to love the children. And you're like, how can he add anything more to my plate? And my point is that I haven't. This is the plate, guys, right? The scaffolding upon which young people rise, the connections with loving adults that allows every other program to work. This Reaching Teens model that I'm talking about, it's about getting you to be the kind of people that makes everything else work. No program works with adults who don't understand how to see, celebrate, and elevate all that is good and right in kids. It is the plate. Thank you, guys. We've got about 14 minutes for questions.
PJ, you're muted.
Sorry. So the first question is, how long will resources at parentandteen.com be available at no cost?
Parentandteen.com will never, ever have a cost. It is extremely well funded by the John Templeton Foundation and by the Hive, by Gary and Kathy Rayant, by the Jewish Foundation of San Francisco, Jewish Family and Children's Services of San Francisco. It is very well funded. It will always, always be free. And you need to know something, guys. If it was up to me, everything I do would be free, right? But it's not up to me.
Okay. Are there resources for younger children, or is the website relevant to elementary school children?
So it's a very good question. I'm virtually always asked this. Like whether, people often in live audiences say, what you're saying seems to me to apply to adults, and what you're saying seems to apply to kids, to children. And I think that they're correct. In terms of adults, I haven't taken care of an adult other than a parent in like nearly 40 years. So I have no credibility. In terms of children, I am a developmentalist. I used to teach nursery school, and most certainly this applies to children. Of course, the specific examples around sexuality and stuff doesn't, but it applies to children, this co-regulation, this trauma sensitivity. In terms of reaching teens, it really should be called Reaching Adolescence. It's just not catchy as a title, but for sure, it begins with 9 and 10-year-olds. Right? So 9 and 10-year-olds through to 22, 23-year-old. So not just teenagers.
Okay. Thank you for an emotionally and intellectually inspiring presentation. I provide mental health awareness and educational training in schools. How important is it, the importance of mental health for kids as young as in elementary standards for kids to learn?
Vitally, right? And this is the way that you have to approach a school. When you go into an educational setting and you talk about social and emotional learning, you talk about emotional health, you talk about trauma, and I do this all the time. I do a lot. I'm a real doctor who sees real kids, but I also do a lot of training. And, I'm going to be honest with you. You go into a school and about half the teachers are like this because the teachers think they are about to try to teach them to be counselors. And they're like, not my job. I already have too much on my plate. So there's two things that you have to make clear. And one is what you just made, because I know by your asking this question, you're really asking me to just underscore this point. And so the first point is kids can't learn when they're running from a tiger. They can't learn when they haven't slept, eaten well. They can't learn, and we know that they learn best in nurtured environments. This has been studied. When a kid knows that a teacher actually cares about them, they learn best. So all of this is about readiness to learn. That's half of how you get the teachers to begin listening. And the second thing is you explain to them that you're never going to ask them to leave their lane. You're asking them to be the kind of adults who have secure, sustained relationships, who are going to hold kids accountable, and who are eyes and ears for trouble. And you teach them just enough to get that kid to the next step without shame or stigma.
What do you do with a child that no matter how much you try to reach that child, it seems that there's no breakthrough?
So my simple answer is keep trying. I want to be clear about something. I write about this stuff. I'm in my 4th decade of experience. I'm good, and I don't always succeed. I end my day often wondering if I made a difference. And so sometimes what I do in that time is I check in with myself and I say, was I my best? Because I need to be reflective about the many days I'm not my best, right? I'm human, I get anxious, I have other things in my mind. But when I'm my best, I convince myself that I've still planted seeds. So in that kid who you're not reaching, I want to remind you that the overwhelming odds are that nobody has reached that kid thus far. And that kid probably has lots of experiences with people giving up on him. So just your not giving up on him or her itself has power. But the final point I want to make to this very insightful and reflective question is to practice in the we, not the I. I think it's really okay. I deal with a lot of human trafficking. As a result, at Covenant House, I am almost never in a room by myself because just kindness can be misinterpreted. But I'm aware that for some people, just my gender, because of the depth of trauma, makes it not appropriate for me to go in certain directions. So we practice in the we. And if I'm working with a young person who just doesn't seem to get me or seems to maybe have a bias against me or believe I have for whatever reason, it's not a match, I have colleagues. And I'm going to say something like, you know, I see blank, blank, blank in you, and the potential is blank, blank, blank. I'm wondering if I'm the best person. Can I tell you about Dr. Nadia? She's a colleague of mine who, and I think you might really click with her. And I'm going to do that soft handout. Because if you're getting demoralized and you're feeling like you're not going to give the kid, don't give up on him, but get him in a really sweet handoff to someone else.
Okay, next question. How have you been able to get community involvement? For example, if we work with many teens who live in neighborhoods with a lot of violence and makes them prone to be in it.
Yeah, so that's really the $1 million question, right? Most communities have already community agencies, and you've got to find the leaders from within that community and not come in as a, rescue fantasy, I'm an agency or I'm a professor at college. You have to really look and do the homework to see what the community thinks are a problem and who are the leaders of the community, and ask those leaders of the community how you can be supportive to their efforts. But this is hard. Like, just because I have an answer to this question, don't read that as like, oh, he knows how to do that. This is a struggle. This is wrestling. This is the $1 million question of, we protect kids within our agencies, but the communities are really struggling, whether it's the community or the families.
Question, how do we begin to change people's implicit biases? They appear to be so deep-rooted that people do not even know they have them.
Indeed they are. So another thing that, PJ, I believe I also gave you as a handout for the